Alright guys, so here's the review of the Yelang V1214. So this is actually the first watch I've checked out from the brand. Previously reviewed another one a few years back, I think it was. It was one I got in on loan off someone. If you haven't seen that review, I'll leave a link to that up in the top here. I also actually featured this in one of my AliExpress 1111 sale videos. It was one that I thought was pretty interesting, so I just had to get one in. So I bought it myself, wasn't sent it, didn't get a reduced price or anything. But as you already know, I'm going to keep it 100% honest all the time, no matter what. So if you want to see that video and the other watches I talk about in it, that'll be up in the top as well. So getting back to this one, let's quickly move the watch out of the way, quickly show you the packaging. I'm not going to go into detail, but you probably haven't seen the packaging from this brand before. So you've got the Yelang logo there, as well as the branding underneath. Then at the bottom it says Yelang Luminous Watch. But this is where it gets interesting on the side. So we've got the H3 Tritium Luminous Watch. This is the reason I picked this watch up. The fact that it's got tritium. Been looking for a good tritium watch for quite a while on AliExpress. So the question is this a good one? Well, here it is. So they've got a few different colours of this one. They've got this green one that I've got here. They also do a blue, and then they also do a pink one. And that's because this is actually advertised as a woman's watch. But don't click off just yet. It's not that simple. It's a few different things on this, which I think make it qualify more as a unisex watch as opposed to a woman's watch. I'd say it's slightly large for a woman's watch. But if it's more of like a guy who's got a slightly smaller than average wrist, this could be ideal. Also, it's got some really interesting things going on too. But first of all, let's go over the dimensions. So this is actually advertised as a 36mm watch, but when I'm measuring it, it's coming at 37. So again, I'd say that's quite large for a woman's watch. So more unisex kind of proportions. In terms of the thickness, it's coming in at 10.8. Lug width is 18. Lug to lug, this is where it gets interesting. So the actual lug to lug is 43.6, but we've got male end links, so it's more like 49 if you include them. So seeing as we're kind of talking about it, let's talk about this bracelet. So in terms of weight, with all the links included, it's 113 grams. Then size of my 7-inch wrist, it's coming at 104. We've got a mixture of brushed and polished links, so the centre links are polished, so obviously they gather fingerprints a bit, so give it a quick wipe. Then the outer links are brushed. It's really nicely done, H-link bracelet, and then we've got polishing on the side of them as well. When it comes to the system they're using to change these links and take them out, it's just a push pin one. So not screws, but not pin and collar, so I'm happy with that. When it comes to the clasp, got the Yelang branding on there, along with that logo. Nothing too fancy, 3 levels of micro adjust. Double pushers, but we have only got a pressed clasp. But you could probably swap that out pretty easily and cheaply for a milled one if you want. Then let's take a closer look at that case back, because this is pretty interesting. Not something you see that often. So it actually says on there, Sea Overlord. And then I think there's a picture of a killer whale. Correct me if I'm wrong, let me know what you think it is down in the comments. So that's a bit of fun. In terms of the specs around the outside, we've got something which is a little bit odd. They've actually written solar drive, which it isn't. The movement in this is actually a Epson VS43. So that's a solar quartz movement. So I think that might just be a bit of a typo. I think they might have meant to put solar diver. Then we've got the fact that it's all stainless steel, 100-meter water resistance, and then this bit here, this is where it gets a bit interesting. This is talking about the tritium tubes, so Microtech H3. That's alluding to the fact that it's got those tritium tubes, which we'll talk about in a bit more detail later on. Moving on to the head of the watch, we've got a fully brushed case, so really nicely done. The only polishing on it is those chamfered edges. Then when it comes to that bezel, you can see we've got some nice polished detailing on there. I've got a slightly odd section here, which doesn't have any grip on it. That's the same on the top and the bottom. So that is going to affect the way it's actually going to use. But we'll talk about that in a bit when we talk about the bezel in a bit more detail. Flicking around to the other side, you can see you've got the crown guards there. And then we've got that nice signed crown with the logo on again. And you can probably also see too, we've actually got that Cyclops just sticking out above the otherwise flat crystal. No dome or curve or anything on that. And you can also see that lume pip is sticking up slightly as well on the bezel. But now let's move on to the dial and talk about that in a bit more detail, because there's quite a lot going on here. So obviously we've got those tritium tubes, and they have actually got that surround around them, the white section. So they are actually raised above the centre section of the dial, so it adds a bit of depth. And obviously they've had to do that because it's tubes and not just lume, or applied indices, which would be thinner again. We've got that raised chapter ring as well, which is integrated into that. We've got that Yelang branding at the top with the logo and text. Don't think you need both. I'd personally just have gone with the logo. Then down at the bottom we've got that Sea Overlord again. We've also got solar divers, but it's not a diver's watch, not certified or anything. Then right down at the bottom, either side of that index of the 6, we've got H3 T100, again alluding to those T100 tritium tubes. Then the only other text on the dial is the 24-hour markers on the inside. Don't think you really need them either. Personally, I'd get rid of them. It's looking a little bit cluttered on the inside of that dial. Then we've got that Cyclops on the date window at the 3 o'clock, which is working nicely aligned and magnifying well. Then we've got that second hand, which doesn't have any tritium obviously, and it's colour matched to the dial, so this is the green one. Obviously if you go for the blue dial, I'll have a blue one, and the pink one I assume will be pink. So now let's test whether we've got Sapphire Crystal on this, using the trusty diamond selector too. And yep, we have got Sapphire Crystal. Now let's quickly test that Cyclops, see if that is as well. And yep, that is also Sapphire, which isn't always the case, so it's good to see they've done that. Now let's talk about this bezel in a bit more detail though. So it is actually slightly inside of the case. Would have been better if it had been slightly wider than the case, so it'd be easier to grip. And because we've got those polished sections in the top and the bottom, that also makes it slightly awkward to grip if you grab it in the wrong place. So it's an aluminium bezel insert. We've got a 120 click bezel. And as you can see, it's not the easiest to grip hold of, as I said. It's got a pretty nice click to it. Got a tiny bit of back play there. So as I say, yeah, there we go. You see my finger slips. That's because of that little bit. As I say, you've got to make sure you're grabbing it on those grippy bits, otherwise it's just going to slip like that. When it comes to the alignment though, if I can get a hold of it to do this last little bit, there we go. You can see it's nicely aligned, so no problems with that. It is just the grip, and the fact that it is slightly inboard of the case. I'm not really entirely sure why they chose to do it like that, because obviously it was always going to be slightly difficult to grip hold of, especially with those sections that don't have any grip at all, and that. One or the other you probably could have dealt with, but both, it is a little bit awkward. But then, with it only being 100 metre water resistance, you're probably not going to go diving with it anyway, so it's probably not that big a deal. But again, something I had to point out. So now, when it comes to the movement, we've just got a push-pull crown there, not a screw down. Turn it one way, we can change the date. Pop it out again. Second hand does stop, so we've got hacking. And as I said earlier, this is an Epson VS43 solar quartz movement. So we've got a rechargeable battery in this, and that will obviously hold the charge, and apparently it will last for up to 6 months on a single full charge. Obviously I've not been able to check that out, because I haven't had that long with the watch. I'll have to try and do a follow-up with this at some point later on down the line, but I imagine it should be fine. So I just think it's an interesting thing. Along with those tritium tubes, we've also got that solar quartz movement. It's just a nice pairing, I think. Something you don't see on AliExpress watches at all. I don't think I've ever seen, well, I don't think I've ever seen a solar one on AliExpress. Never mind one that's got tritium and solar. So, seeing as we're talking about it, let's get down to this now and show you what this tritium is actually like. As I said, this is the T100, so this is the strongest tritium you can get. So obviously we don't need to charge it up because it glows all the time, day or night, doesn't matter. That's the beauty of tritium tubes. So with this one we've got the green colour. If you get the blue dial version, I think that has a blue colour. And the pink one actually has pink, surprisingly enough. I wasn't expecting that. That is pretty interesting. So the way it works is that it's using radioactive atoms of hydrogen to get those tubes to glow, to give you that effect. So the half-life on that is actually 12 years, so they should last for 12 years. So obviously we don't need to worry about degradation or fading. This will glow like this constantly for 12 years. So no problems at all there. I do like the fact that they've put a slightly different colour at the top as well, with the orange one, so you know which way is up. Always handy. And you might be able to see we have actually got a loom pip at the top there. That does actually need charging up, so I'll quickly do that now. That is the only bit that is loomed on this though. Everything else is tritium, hands and indices. But if you do want to use it in the dark with that bezel, you're going to need that loom pip. And obviously eventually that will fade. So if you've got this far into the video, you're probably thinking this is a pretty interesting watch still. And you probably want to know what it's like on wrist. Is it going to be alright on the average size men's wrist, or is it going to look comically small because it is aimed at women? Also, we're going to go over the pros and cons of this and whether I recommend you picking one up if you're still interested. So let's do that now. And here it is on my 7-inch wrist. So I personally think this wears pretty nicely. Yeah, it's on the smaller side in terms of divers, but it doesn't look stupidly small, I don't think. That lug to lug seems pretty reasonable, with it being around 49mm as I said earlier. and it curves and conforms the wrist nicely too. When it comes to the clasp, got a decent level of micro adjust so you can get a good fit as well. And I do like the little polished details on the bracelet and also on the bezel as well, just catching the light. I think it's a good looking piece. And as I say, on my wrist at least, I think it wears quite well. Obviously if you've got a bigger than 7-inch wrist, this probably isn't going to be for you. If you've got a smaller than 7-inch wrist on the other hand, this might be just what you're after. When it comes to things I'd change though, I'd start with that bezel. Get rid of that section where it's just plain polishing. Needs to be grippy all the way around. I'd also make it slightly wider than the case as well, just so it's easier to grip. But other than that, I don't really have too many issues. I'm loving the tritium, especially working nights, it comes in really handy. Then we've also got that pretty unusual for AliExpress watches, solar quartz movement, which again, is something really cool. Do really like that, something different. The only other real issues I do have, perhaps the clasp. You could have a milled one, but again, as I've said, that's pretty cheap and easy to swap out, so I might do that at some point. But other than that, as I say, I'm pretty happy with my purchase. And I definitely recommend it if you're a smaller guy who's looking for a dive watch, or if you're looking for a tritium watch, or even a solar quartz watch. I think it covers quite a few bases, for me at least anyway. It's a pretty unusual, pretty unique watch. And if you are still interested in picking one up, link will be down in the description as always. That is an affiliate link, it does help support the channel, but you don't pay any extra. But that's it for this one guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.